Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Have a great day.
Hi, my name's Erin, and I'm an alcoholic. My home group is Women's Saturday Soul Searchers, and I have a sponsor and I have a sponsee. I got sober October 10/21/01, October 21st, 2001, and it's so that's about just over 15 years, which means I got sober when I was 24, and I just turned 40 in February, so I'm still kind of getting around that number as well. It's crazy. So what it was like for me is that I was, I guess you'd say, a late bloomer to alcohol. I grew up with a mother who grew up with an alcoholic, and so alcohol was kind of demonized growing up for me. My mom told me when I was a kid that when my dad proposed, she said, "Well, you go to church with me every Sunday, and you promise not to drink." And so there was, it wasn't just a liquid. And so what happened for me was I left home. I grew up in Seattle. I went to school up in Bellingham. And one of the very first times, there was like a dorm party. There was, like Boone's Farm and beer. And I remember getting that glass and making that decision. Like it wasn't, like this was a real conscious decision. I want whatever this is because, I couldn't, I was always really shy. I didn't have a lot of friends. I always felt like I was on the outside of the dome, and everything in there is in Technicolor, but my world is that kind of like gray blue. And I just was like, I wanted something different. And that first night, people would go to the bathroom and I'd be in the room by myself and I would be sipping off of everyone's drink. And then they would come in and they'd say something. They'd be like, I don't know. So looking back, I would say that I was an alcoholic from the start. And so what happened for me was, it worked for me. Like I was able to talk to people. People said that I was funny, and interesting. And so, what happened next was, my fourth year in school, I went away to Europe, sort of the cliche, if you can do it, then you can get away. And I met a lot of people who were like me. One of the girls that I met over there, I met at a meeting, 20 years later. And I was able to drink how I wanted to drink. I was with my people. We didn't make excuses. And then what happened was I moved back and I saw my old friends. And within, this was one of those things I didn't realize till afterwards. Within a month, the people who I'd lived with before, hid all the alcohol from me. And they told me that I needed to see a counselor before any of the alcohol would come back. And so I went to go see a counselor. And I told her, my life is stressful. I am 22 years old. I'm taking 2 classes. I'm working at a coffee shop and my friends are bugging me. Like, I need this drink. And she said, well, how about when you get home from the coffee shop, you have a cup of chamomile tea to relax. And I thought, if chamomile tea is the solution to my problems really can't be that bad. And so I convinced my friends that it was okay for me to drink again. And then I moved out of that house so that I could live by myself. And then what happened was, I was able to graduate and I was working in this coffee shop. And what started happening for me was that, I would go from the kitchen to the storage room and I would like take a breath, and then I wouldn't remember if I was going there or if I was leaving, and if I was supposed to pick something up or if I just put something down. And I'd go out to parties with the friends that I worked with, and they'd say stuff. There was this boy who was a dishwasher, and he was like 15 years old, and he was at this party with us. And the next day he said something to me about, "Oh, Erin, that was so crazy what you said or you did or whatever." And I looked at him, I'm like, "I did not. What?" And he just, I guess maybe because he was just so much younger than me, and he had this look on his face like, "You really don't remember that?" And it just, because I didn't spend time with my family anymore. I was protecting them. I didn't want them to see who I was. And so then I tried to control my drinking. And we talk in here about controlling and enjoying, and never the twain shall meet. And I just remember going to parties and trying to do that. And having like 2 beers and hating everyone in the room. And so then I would go home and black out. And that was my life was, like I had everything carefully planned out with the blacking out or passing out and coming to and getting ready to go face my day. And everything was blacking out and coming to. And I just felt like that my world just kept getting smaller and smaller. And I knew that this inanimate thing had ultimate power over everything in my life. And I didn't know what to do about it. And so I decided, what would make sense is that I need to leave. And so if I moved from Bellingham, Washington, I would move down to Oakland, California, because I'd been there one time and it was sunny. And so, before I left, and I was no longer on my parents' insurance, I went, I had like a physical, and the doctor has you fill out this little form about, fill in the dot, how much do you drink, like, occasionally, or 1 glass a day. And like the biggest one was like 5 glasses. And so I was like, well, that's an easy one I can say yes to, because it's a lie, but it's so tight, like 5, what, So so that's what ended up happening was I filled out the far end of the form on everything, and my doctor was really serious and said, "I need you to go see a behavioral health counselor," whatever they're called. And so I saw this woman, and she told me, after we talked a little bit, she said, "Well, Erin, I'm going to tell you something. I've been in this profession for about 10 years, and I've also, am a sober alcoholic, and I've been sober for about 15 years. I can't tell you that you're an alcoholic. What I can tell you is, in my 15 years of being a sober member of AA, and in my 10 years of being a counselor, 90% of the people that I've talked to who drink like you drink were alcoholics." And that kind of blew my mind. And so she gave me the schedule and suggested that I go to meetings. And so I called my best friend, and we went out to a bar, because that was some heavy news. And and so I moved to California, and I'll tell you what happened for me. I came to a meeting, and it was a newcomers meeting, and the secretary didn't show up. And I was with all these people who didn't look like me, who were there to get their court card signed. And somebody finally volunteered to come, somebody who had like a year to secretary the meeting, and we all kind of talked. And I had that moment of connection. Like, there wasn't necessarily a lot of solution happening, but I was like, I relate to these people. Like, this, I belong here. And so I started coming to meetings, and And what happened for me was I was at this job interview. I was at the old spaghetti factory on the harbor in Jack London Square in Oakland. And we were doing blah, blah, blah. And then we were downstairs. She wanted to show me on a Friday night what it's like in the waiting area when people are waiting to sit down. And it was like I had a religious experience. I was standing there and it was dark outside. But somehow all the lights from the ceiling were glinting off of people's cocktail cups, and like it was a rainbow of liquor. And it was just, I had no mental defense against that. I can't remember what happened the rest of the night. Like all I'm thinking is that alcohol, I need that. And I went back to this house where I was staying at. The beautiful man I took the room from left me a bottle of vodka for housewarming or whatever. So my last drink, I had a pint glass that had vodka, and then I had a little splash of orange juice, for color. And so I remember about the first 2 sips, and then the next thing I remember was waking up in the morning and the glass is empty and the rug is dry. And I had that moment of, if I keep doing my life my way, this is the rest of my life. I am so clear. This is the rest of my life. If I keep doing it according to my rules, or I could try this AA thing for real. And that was my moment. And so, I started going to meetings and actually, trying to talk to people. It helped that I was smoking at the time, so I would give myself little rules, like you have to stay outside and smoke a whole cigarette with people before the meeting starts, and you have to do that afterwards as well. And that was my little trick to be able to actually talk to people before and after the meeting. And there was this woman with, 5 or 7 years of sobriety who would corner me after the meeting all the time. She'd be like, "Hey, Erin, you got a sponsor yet?" And I'd be like, "I gotta go." And then I made a deal with myself. Before you have 90 days, you have to ask that woman to be your sponsor. And so I did. And we got started on that. And she was very sweet and gentle with me. And then when she moved, I got another sponsor. And she was someone who taught me that, for her, one of her 9-step amends to herself was to tell other women who were coming up behind her that it's okay to say no, that as a sober woman, I have choices today. And that was one of those things that I had to learn as a sober alcoholic, was that just because you liked me doesn't mean I have to say yes to you. Because, we're here for recovery, but other stuff happens as well. And that was one of those things, like that was one of those little turning points where I got to learn a big part of working the steps for me has been figuring out who I am. I tried so hard to be what I thought you wanted so that you would like me, that I forgot a lot about who I was. It was one of those, that was the one thing that I think about is, I don't know if anybody remembers Popeye the Sailor Man, the cartoon, but that was one of the big things that I've learned in AA, is that I am what I am, and that's all that I am. And so I started working the steps with Louise, and that was, looking at all the different ways that alcohol made all the decisions in my life, and how I could learn how to, go to the grocery store, because I really, forgot how to buy food and make sure that I was eating things, not just things that would soak up the liquor the best, but the things that had, protein and vitamins and things like that. And that if I was really going to do this, that, for me, it was just about the first time around working the steps and dealing with God. I kind of had to mispronounce it just to be comfortable. So I would talk about GERD. Because I just wasn't really ready at that point in my relationship with a higher power to say that word. But then when I got to step 3, she said, my sponsor had me get down on my knees and we held hands and we said the 3rd step prayer together. And I was like, I can get over myself enough for this just to do it her way. And I'll just do it because that's her suggestion. And so I was able to kind of, a lot of step work for me has been about, I'm just going to do it. And then I get to see later on how it does end up working. That I get to look at, a lot of doing my 4th and 5th step and seeing, and thinking that I was being so good at just containing all of the chaos to myself. And what I've discovered is, after my first 10 years of sobriety, I moved back to Seattle. And I actually lived with my parents. And I got to start having a relationship with my siblings. I have 4 younger siblings. And I would say honestly that it wasn't until I moved back to Seattle, 5 years ago that I really started to have a relationship with them. Because I know that what I have is good. And, whether it's great or whether it's whatever, it's like, this is all that I have. And I want to be able to have a relationship with these people. And so I get to today, even with the regret that I wasn't really comfortable around my family for the bulk of my life. Like, I get to do it different now, and that's really all I have. So one of the other kind of powerful things that happened for me working that 4th and 5th step and then trying to, make it a part of my life and being comfortable with who I am and what I care about and let my passion go where it will and not like, what are my parents going to want me to do or what's going to be cool with my friends or whatever. I had another kind of, I think it was like the 1-year anniversary of my first 5th step with my sponsor. And I woke up, like I had this wake up on a Saturday morning at like 6:00 in the morning. I'm like, oh my God, I have to talk to my sponsor. And I didn't really even know what it was, but it was, I know I need to talk to her. And so I waited until an appropriate hour and I called her and we sat out in the backyard of her house. And it wasn't until that moment, like thunderbolt, I'm like, Louise, I think I'm gay. And that was, to me, it just shows the level of how much I really didn't like any part of myself, that I wasn't ready to see that until I did all of that other work of believing that a higher power just wants me to be happy and doesn't care about rules. And that if I'm going to be sober, all I have to answer to is myself. And I want this life and I want to be happy. If I'm going to be alive, I might as well enjoy that choice. And then I was able to remember that I really liked to write. When I was in grade school and high school, that was really something that was important to me, but I started drinking and I forgot. And so I was able to go back to school and do that. And so what it's like today is, I got married in 2006 and in 2010 we had our first son, and in 2013 we had our second. I have a really nice job. I just started this job in May. So, I feel like a lot of my stories when I talk to my sponsees is like, hang in there. It gets better eventually. I have a job where I feel respected as a human being and challenged, and I feel comfortable joking around with the people I work with. Which is when I I haven't had that particular combination until this job. And I've also had, like we've had a lot of fear of financial insecurity. That was, right after I gave birth to our first son, and we thought we were being so good about, being good. My wife lost her job. It was, I don't know, the Bay Area in 2010, there was, just all the work kind of shut down. And so that was the thing. We got to go, both of us have been sober for a long time. Good model citizens, went to a lot of meetings, had sponsees, worked with our sponsor. And, I was 33 years old and I was living in the room that I grew up in with my sister. We pushed together the 2 single beds so that we could sleep next to each other. But that was the best we could do. That was like showing up to life as life is. Eventually things got better. And that was the thing. I got to listen to your experience, and you all talked about how stuff gets bad and stuff gets different and stuff gets super murky, and it's hard to really squint and see that light at the end of the tunnel, but that you keep showing up, and things got different. And it was usually, like, at least my experience is that, something that's crazy out of left field happens. And then I can, if I'm awake enough and paying attention enough to see it, then I can move over there and things turn out okay. Yeah. And that's been my experience being, alive and conscious and a sober member of AA. And I think, just to finish up, like what I knew when I first got sober was, like they talked about the 90 and 90. So getting to 90 meetings in the first 90 days. And if I ever skipped a meeting, then starting that timer over again. And that worked for me. And, meeting with my sponsor every week, worked for me. And then, having a relationship with another member in AA and becoming acquainted with our sister program, for those of us who love members, people who are alcoholic, whether they are sober or not, really helped me a lot. And today it's different. I'll say my truth as someone who is taking care of little kids and someone who's married, someone who has a full-time job. These were all things I did not have when I first got sober. And now that I do have them, my sobriety looks different. I still keep in touch with my sponsor. I keep in touch with my sponsee. And I have a lot of compassion for what's the best I can do today. Because, I have my home group that I make sure that I get to every Saturday, and I keep it really real with them, because I know, just because I have 15 years of sobriety doesn't mean that I've got all this stuff figured out. Like, I am so clear. I'm still an alcoholic. And even if I'm not fantasizing about a drink, I need to keep my conscious contact with a higher power and with all of you, because you're my family. You are the people who, when I came home with just barely over a year of sobriety, my dad picked me up at SeaTac Airport and he said, "Erin, your mom was diagnosed with 3rd stage breast cancer last month, but we've all dealt with it, and I need you to not make this into a big deal. So if you could deal with it by the time we get home, that would be great." Like, almost literally. And so, like, I'm this little fragile baby of, like, I don't even, I'm newly acquainted with feelings. And I'm just like, oh yeah, this is why I am the way I am. And so what I do is I find a meeting. I go to, there was a Cherry Hill meeting, that had like an alkathon going, because it was Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever that was. And I show up And I let him know, this is what's going on. I'm freaking out. There's no way for me to have feelings at home. And I'm here and I'm like, snot and tears and with all of these strangers. And while I'm doing this, all of the women are writing their names and their phone number in the back of the book and passing it around. And I have that I have that feeling, like, as much as I love the family that I grew up with and I'm grateful to them and everything that they can do for me and I can do for them. Like, I know that I have you, even if I only saw those people for 1 hour out of my life and I never saw them again. Like, there was that moment of God for me. That first real understanding of higher power for me was sitting in a meeting, and I had that just feeling of, like, even though there's all these people who are just like me who do not have their act together, somehow when we're all in this room together, there's just some kind of something that happens in the air, and I can feel it. And I know whatever happens, that if I just keep showing up, there's some safety in that. Like, whatever's happening with my bank account or fights with people or whatever, like, I know that I can just show up and I can be safe, and I can be loved. Like, however, if I'm wearing nice clothes, or if I show up 15 minutes late, or if I haven't showered in a week, or if I'm just high on life and, loving everything about AA, that, I can be here, and I hope that you can feel that too. So I'll pause there. Thank you for my sobriety.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I'm an alcoholic. It is an honor and a privilege to be able to tell you guys my story. I do this for a living. I talk to groups of people like this all the time, and I don't get nervous. But y'all are my people, and I'm nervous tonight. So hopefully you can hear a message of experience, strength, and hope tonight. And I hope to affect the alcoholic in this room who is still suffering. And that's not always just the newcomer. That's been my experience. I've been many years sober in these rooms and pretty miserable. So, but today is a much different story. So I grew up in Georgia. I have a younger sister. And for like the first half of my life, had a pretty charmed life. Two loving parents. My mom was like a soccer mom in the suburbs of Atlanta. Some of my fondest memories of of growing up are baking with my mom. We had this pretty big kitchen growing up, and there was this island in the kitchen, and she'd be on one side of the island, and my sister and I would bring up our chairs to the other side, and we'd bake with her. And all three of us shared that same memory with much fondness. And that's a gift that she gave me. I'm an incredible baker. I leave something to be desired when cooking is concerned, but I can bake a mean batch of brownies. Okay, so I have notes. My parents' marriage wasn't that great, but they really, held it together for my sister and I, and just kind of operated, individually. And I remember seeing a picture of them growing up at a party, and they were kissing, and I'd never seen them kiss before, ever. And I was like, wow, like, how did these people capture this, right? So I'd no real basis for what a good relationship or marriage was, right? And, I grew up in the South. We went to the pool every day in the summer because it's so hot. Like, that's really all you do. And I had a crush on, like, every single lifeguard. And my sister and I would play house, and my mom taught school later, and so she'd bring home like grade books and pens and pencils and all kinds of school stuff, and we'd have all our friends over and play school downstairs, and we'd play dress up and babies and all very like normal girl childhood stuff. And then middle school rolls around, and and I feel like that's when the alcoholism sort of set in. And it's tough to distinguish, though. Adolescence is no joke. And, I don't want to confuse that with alcoholism, right? But my parents' marriage really started failing at that point in time. And I really began to have those feelings that we hear about. Oh, I forgot to tell you that my sobriety date is January 21st, 2010, and I have a sponsor, and I have sponsees, and my sponsor has a sponsor. So just to qualify myself on that end. So I get into middle school, and my parents throw me in sports, and I'd been in sports like even as a young kid, but sports really helped athletics helped take off that edge, right? Like I used to have a dog and she was not dog friendly at all. But when I ran her 8 miles a day and I could bring her to the dog park and she was okay. And so I brought her to the vet one time and she was like, "You're treating symptoms. You're not treating the problem, what's really going on with this dog," right? And so my parents were managing my symptoms of being ornery and difficult and never satisfied with, throwing athletics at it. And then they put me in piano, and I excelled, right? And I had this amazing teacher who just sculpted me, and I had a gift. And I was playing, at all the recitals, and I was playing at the beginning, and I was playing at the end, and then I was in sports, and I was making really good grades. And then I found alcohol, right? And this is so sad, but I don't remember my first drink, y'all. I mean, I cannot believe I don't, but I don't. I mean, I know that it was around 13 or 14, but I don't. I have massive chunks of time just erased from my memory, and that is one of them. But I do know that when I did start drinking, that my world cracked open and exploded. Right? Alcohol did for me what I could not do for myself. My parents never drank. I've never seen my parents drunk. Alcoholism runs in my family on both sides, but not in my immediate family. So when I started drinking, they had this liquor cabinet that had dust on the bottles, and so I'd take old pickle jars and put tequila or vodka in there, and then I'd go out and get drunk with my friends, and my head would be in the toilet all night, right? And my friends would be like, "Why can't you pace yourself, Maggie? Just pace yourself, right? And then you can have fun." And pacing myself was not in my vocabulary, and I was looking at them like, what? Okay, I'll try next time. And it was the same thing. I pretty much drank alcoholically right off the bat. And so then get into high school. I have very little relationship with my sister. I found alcohol and drugs, and she found the Catholic Church. I really wish I would have gone that way sometimes. We all have we're all dealt our hand. And then, I found alcohol and drugs, and my parents were splitting. And so my mom was going back to graduate school, teaching, had a boyfriend. She was, completely checked out, and she had been chronically depressed my entire life. And it really just started to set in then. And then my dad had gender identity issues going on at the time. I will get into that later. This is AA, not the People program, but it is important. And so, my sister and I were basically left to raise ourselves. And so we did that to the best of our ability. And I was still really active in high school with athletics. I was making okay grades. I found out that I could make a B+ average and keep everybody happy and still do what I wanted to do, right? And that was the name of the game. How can I maintain how everything looks on the outside so I can get what I want when I want? And that's really all I cared about. I had no semblance of anything outside of myself. And so then I quit piano, right? Because piano was in the way. And, my teacher, when I told her this, she started crying. And she was like, "You will regret this for the rest of your life. This is what otherwise could have been possibly a promising career in college, but it was getting in the way of my drinking." And, I was in high school. I couldn't drink every day. I couldn't even drink every weekend. And what I really want to talk about here is that, is the symptom of this disease, right? Because drinking is just a symptom, but I was dry a lot, throughout my drinking, just in these periods where I wasn't able to drink. And so I was not very, I was pretty egregious in high school. I know that's shocking. But, you know, I mouthed off to my teachers. I was not getting along with my parents at all. I was playing them against each other because they were divorced. And so if my mom didn't give me the answer to something I wanted, I played my dad against her. You know, and for instance, one time I wore this really short dress to school, and there was like a dress code. You had to be like below, you know, by your knee. And one of my teachers goes, you know, wow, Maggie, it's pretty short. And under my breath, but not so under my breath, I said, she's just jealous. She like literally dragged me to the principal's office. My parents were called, you know, and I was just, you know, I didn't even care. My mom was like, you go apologize. And I did. And I felt nothing. And I was just so unhappy inside. And I had no idea why. And then I had another teacher. My mom taught in the school system, right? So she knew all the tricks. And so this teacher was friends with my mom, and my mom was telling her all this stuff about me. And this teacher comes up to me and she's like, why do you do this? Why do you drink? Why do you do the things you do? You know? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I didn't know I had alcoholism, right? Nobody else could diagnose it either, right? I knew that I was just really unhappy and making everybody miserable around me. And all I wanted to do was get drunk whenever I could. And she said to me, she goes, yeah, she goes, my girls don't drink. They want to be in control and blah, blah, blah. And they would never drink. And I remember I felt so low at that point, right? Because I wanted to be those girls. I knew the person that I was not who I wanted to be, but I was completely powerless over this disease, even at like the age of 16. And so, I graduated from high school, and I was in this relationship with this guy, and I just decided to go to college where he went. And that's kind of a big part of my story, right? Like, I really looked to men to fix me. And and my parents were like, non-existent. And so I was just like, well, I guess I'll go to school with you. And this man really taught me how to drink. He taught me how to just get it done. And so I was drinking like a case of beer a day, you know, and he didn't like me smoking pot. So what that means when I can't temper my drinking with pot is I'm worse. Right, I'm totally worse. And I'm not a very pleasant drunk, and we had a very volatile, mutually physically abusive relationship, and I was in this relationship in my first year of college. It was completely out of control, but I had some kernel of self-preservation where I was able to, you know, there by the grace of God, I got out of it. And so, you know, and I was fully blown alcoholic, you know, when I met him. By the time, like, he'd really taught me how to drink at 17. And so, and I knew, I remember telling somebody, you know, I'm going to have to stop this one day. I'm going to have to quit drinking one day, I feel like. And I was kind of familiar with AA. My mom was going to Al-Anon. So I didn't really know anything about the 12 steps. My dad's in another program too, but you would never have known it. He didn't talk about it. It wasn't part of the family discussions. And so, you know, I pledged a sorority, and which is just like, you know, opens the door to even more drinking. And there was a night where I was at like a fraternity party, and like me and like this group of girls came in, and it was like something out of a movie where there's like this cloud of smoke around us, and I was wearing like a sports bra with a tank top, and I just looked like white trash, and I was like dancing with this guy like behind him, but he was dancing with his girlfriend, right? So I'm behind him. He's like grinding with his girlfriend, right? And I'm wasted and I don't even know it. You know, and I also, one more little, you know, not drunk-a-log, but just like sober behavior, you know, dry behavior. I was dating this man, and I had come back to Atlanta, over the summer between, my sophomore and junior year of college, and he was from Savannah, and he'd flown to Savannah to come see me, and I had my mom break up with him at my door. So he knocks on my door, and I told my mom, I don't want to see him anymore. You need to break up with him for me. And she did. She did. So this is a family disease. And I made amends to him, and we will talk about that in a minute. I graduated from college and, with a degree in lies and deception. I don't know how, and actually decent grades. And so, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I had no direction. I didn't, I didn't have parents coaching me saying, this is what you should do. Right. And that's when I started drinking every day. I was drinking every day and smoking weed, and I had this terrible job that I hated, and I was living in Mobile, Alabama, and I was like, I'm going back to Atlanta. So I moved back to Atlanta and took me with me. Nothing was getting better. I was living with a childhood friend of mine who owned this beautiful townhome in Atlanta, and she was like, her life was going like this and up, and mine was, just going down, right? And here's this girl who I grew up with her, right? We are cut from the same cloth, and I am not doing well. And so I did black out quite a bit, but if you go to any sorority or fraternity house, they black out. It's as popular as, skipping class. It doesn't make me alcoholic. It just makes my life more difficult, makes for a lot more amends. I really didn't drink much alone except for that period after college for a few months where I didn't know what to do. But I just absolutely hated myself. I have very few pictures from that time. I could barely look myself in the mirror. I had zero relationship with my sister, and no real relationships. The ones that I had left with my friends were dwindling. And so I decided to go and see a therapist. And she recommended that I go to AA. And I saw her for a few months, right? So I still had a few more things to do, and a few more, I had some drunks left, right? I still had to go try it out. And one thing that happened right before I went to AA was I was dating this Brazilian guy that I worked with at this restaurant. He knew 10 words of English. It was a very rich relationship. And he said to me, we'd leave the restaurant. He'd come over to my apartment. On the way home, I'd go by the liquor store. It was just the same thing every night, one bad, Groundhog Day over and over. And he did not drink, and he said to me, how do you say, because he knew no English, and he's like, how do you say I am embarrassed for you? I was like, you nailed it. That's right, buddy. You got it. So that's funny now. It wasn't then. So I go to AA, right? I don't know what happened. It was not the worst night of drinking, and it wasn't the best. It was just the same thing over and over and over. And God tapped me on the shoulder, and I went to a meeting in this clubhouse in Atlanta. And it was a 10 o'clock meeting, and in Atlanta, they give away these little poker chips, at every single meeting. So I know we all go to Magnolia here, but there's a 24-hour chip, and then, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and then years. So I picked up my white chip, and then everybody just sits out. It's kind of like Fremont, right? Everybody just sits outside and smokes cigarettes, and then you go to Waffle House afterwards and eat a bunch of sugar and drink a bunch of coffee till 4 a.m. and then go to work and, do it all over again. And that saved me. I didn't go to rehab, right? So I really had to water this thing down with meetings. And I went to a ton of meetings, probably 2 a day during the week and probably 3 a day on the weekends, because I just didn't feel safe or sane anywhere else. And I remember in this clubhouse, and they're still there. There's pictures on the wall, and they're very simple pictures. But the first one is of like a martini glass, and it has like a big line through it, right? And then no words. And then the second one is a picture of the clubhouse, right? So go to meetings, don't drink, go to meetings. Then the third one was this guy going, like the stick figure going upstairs, so working the steps. The fourth one was a telephone, right, to call your sponsor. And the fifth one was like this book with, it was very simple, right, because we're alcoholics, and with a book with these glasses, so to work the steps, right? And it was just like, this is what you do. But the recovery there wasn't the greatest. And so I met Molly, and Molly said, Maggie, you need to come to this meeting at a church. And I was like, oh, and so then I found out about the church meetings, right? And they were so much better, and there was a lot more recovery, a lot more women, and that's where I found my sponsor. And so Candace took me through the book, through the 12 and 12. And I found true recovery here in Seattle going through the big book. So when Candace took me through the 12 and 12, the only way she knew how, my experience was not the greatest. And so when I did my 4-step very haphazardly, and then went on to make amends, I had to make amends to a childhood friend of mine that I completely botched, and she still won't talk to me to this day. So I'm going to talk a lot about amends, because doing them correctly and with a good sponsor is vital. So I stayed sober for, a couple years, and then my boyfriend at the time was like, I'm going to move to Seattle. And he was like, you should come with me, and I'm still not like really recovered, right? Like I'm dry, and I was staying sober on fear, fun, and fellowship, but, it's not enough. So I'm looking to him to save me, right? And I'm like, this is going to be great. I get to move. I want to go to the West Coast. So we did. So there's me living on the east side with him working 24/7, and I'm going absolutely nuts, living 3,000 miles away from home. And that's when I found my first sponsor, who took me through the big book and through all 164 pages. And I met with her every Tuesday at 7, and she was not my friend, and she was not my mother. She wasn't my accountant. She wasn't my therapist. She was my sponsor, and she let me know that. And it's exactly what I needed. And we did the first 2 steps, and then we sat on her floor and held hands for the 3rd step and said the 3rd step prayer together. And it was really awkward, and we were both off a little bit, but we did it anyway. And I did a 4th step, and she had me do 1 column at a time, and each column had its due date. And that's how I take my sponsees through it, right? So when I hear people talk about, I've been on my 4th step for 8 months or 9 months, I'm like, how does that happen? Right? Because I had this really methodical process that really worked well. And then I shared my 5th step with her, right? And she shared her experiences with me too. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is okay. Like I feel safe, right? Like you are me. And, when I walked into my first meeting, like I had that same feeling, right? Like that I was home. And I hadn't felt at home since I was, 10 years old. And I was 25 when I went into my first AA meeting. And then when I met with her, it was just reaffirmed, right? That this is a safe space, and I am you, and you, we are one here, right? We both have this thing. And then I did my 6th and 7th step with her. She wrote down a list of my character defects. That's fun, an index card of your worst character defects from your sponsor. And then we did the 8th and the 9th step, and I said, I'm from Georgia, right? And I go, I think I'm going to call these people. And she's like, did you hurt them over the phone? So, no. So I did 2 road trips, 2. And I went all over the Southeast, right? I mean, I went everywhere. I went to Enterprise, Alabama, the home of the boll weevil, okay? And in the lineage I come from, we have an amends process. It's a 5-step process. And the first The first step is to make the appointment. The second step is to state the harm caused. The third is to ask if you've left anything out. The fourth is to ask if they'd like to tell me how my behavior affected them. And the fifth one is, how can I make this right? And I did that with every single person. And so when I went to Enterprise, I had 2 roommates that I'd lived with that were from there, right, in college. And these girls, one was bulimic and one had a sex addiction. And so we all had our little addictions, and I looked okay, right? The wheels were falling off of them. I looked okay with my alcoholism. And so when I went to go visit them, the gal with the sex addiction had gotten pregnant a month before she took her MCATs for medical school. And I didn't go and visit her in the hospital when she had the baby. I sent flowers, but I didn't know I had sent flowers, right? So when I went to Enterprise and I'm making amends to her, she goes, Maggie, you sent me flowers. We are, and not that that's enough. I need to show up, but I'm also not the monster I think I am all the time. And that's just as important, right? I was right sized. And me just driving to Enterprise, Alabama was enough. I mean, I gave them the amends they deserved, but it was enough just to have me there. So then from Enterprise, I went up to Birmingham. And in Birmingham, I had another, a really good friend of mine from college. And I'm going through the process, and I'm stating the harm caused. And she's like, stop. She goes, you have no idea why you're here, do you? And she goes, I don't even care. I can't believe that you think that I would even care about that. You are here because you fell off the face of the earth, right? And the breakup of our friendship was worse than the breakup with my boyfriend, of 4 years in college. That's why you're here. And so, a lot of my amends have been shaped from the previous amends, right? Of what I need to do differently. And so a lot of my amends I've started out with, I may not, there's a lot I don't remember, and there's a lot that you probably do remember. And so it's a very interactive conversation. That man that my mom broke up with, so I had to go to Savannah, and I met with him, and he said to me, he goes, Maggie, you're the only woman that's ever made me cry. And so, and he and I are good today. I feel like I'm moving this table. Am I? I kind of am. We're good. He's, married, baby. We're friends on Facebook. But I got to see how I affected men. I used to think that men were just made of steel, right? With no feelings. And, I got to have somebody tell me how my behavior, what it did to them. And when you hear the truth about yourself, it's really hard to go back in the other direction, right? It's been my experience that this path that we're on, this spiritual path, it just becomes more and more narrow. And less things in terms of behavior become less and less acceptable from me. And people start expecting more from me as well. So I'm sober and I'm in Seattle and I'm doing it. I've got a sponsor. I'm actively working my amends. I've got sponsees, and a couple things happened. So when I first got sober in Atlanta, I switched seats on the Titanic and I started pounding candy corn and sugar. And so I started managing a food problem with something similar to speed. So I started doing that, and I was drinking NyQuil every night to go to bed because I was all hyped up on, steroids during the day. I'm trying to keep this singleness a purpose. And then my dad had come out that he was transgender. So he transitioned from male to female. And this was he did this about 5 years ago. And about 5 years ago, around the time the steroid thing happened. And so I I ended up finally being able to get sober again on January 21st of 2010. And I was really miserable that first year. And I switched up my meetings, and I got a new home group, and I was there every week, and I did every service position there, and I was in that group for 4 years straight. And I did contrary action for a year, and then the mind followed the body, and I had, a spiritual experience, once again, and this time it was the real deal. And so I had to go do some work in another program, and I say that because AA is not the panacea for all that ails us. And I hear that often in these rooms. Well, if you work the steps, then everything should just take care of itself. And that was not my experience. And I know that there are a lot of women suffering from what I can still suffer from today. And so I just want to be open and honest about that. And so what it means is, like, for as far as my dad is concerned, is that the man who has shaped my ideal for men is now a woman, right? And what do we do with that? And what does this look like? And how does this play into our, relationship as a family? What is my image of other men? I'm not married. I want to get married and have a family and a partnership with somebody. What does this look like? And so for the past 5 years, my family and I, we've been on this journey, with my dad, and, there's now babies involved with, my sister's had a child, and that's changed things. And it's really made me look at, myself, how I view men, how I view women, and, really, how do I come into acceptance, around this? And I need to add that I've made amends with my parents, and I've made a living amends with my parents and my sister. And I was the maid of honor in my sister's wedding. I was not anything of honor with her in that previous life of mine, right? She now lives 10 minutes away from me, so she and her family live here. And things are a little rocky right now, but they are on the road to getting better, and they are night and day, from what they were. My relationship with my parents since I've moved has actually gotten a lot better. I don't know what distance does to people, but I talk to them all the time. We're on group text all the time. They visit every month. I don't know if that's a good thing, but babies do that. And, and I can be honest with them, right? And I can put boundaries up with my mother. There's no more breaking up with my boyfriends anymore. And, I can be honest with my dad. For the most part, still working on it. I really want to talk about, I have like 4 minutes left, so I want to talk about my relationship with God. So my sponsor today really leads me in the direction of prayer and meditation, and really wants me to seek God first before I seek anyone else. And oftentimes when I'm struggling with something, she'll put me under a treatment, which is meditating for 20 minutes twice a day, and then writing after each meditation, and then follow it up with prayer. And so what this has done for me is it's given me a peace and a calmness I have never known before. And it helps me become more disciplined in my day. It helps me make better choices. It helps me be a better, worker. And it helps me be a better sister and daughter and friend and sponsee. And I hate it. I do not love meditating. I wish I could, sit up here and tell you I do. I don't, but I do it anyway. I learned contrary action gets results in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so, and before that, I had a sponsor who I went to for everything. This woman was my rock. And she relapsed, and so I had to get a new sponsor, and I'm still not real happy about it today, like 3 years later. It is what it is. But what it's done is really strengthened my relationship with God. And I talk to God all the time, all throughout the day. My sponsees, the same thing. And that's the other thing I want to talk about are my sponsees. I travel a lot for work, and so I really have to make them a priority. And I Skype with one of them. She's in Georgia, and we Skype from hotel rooms all the time. And then I have another one who lives here, and these girls are, we just finished The Family Afterward. So I'm reading Two Wives twice and The Family Afterward twice. It's awful, but we're finally beyond it. They're right behind each other, and they save me. They give me gratitude. They give me hope. They go through really bad stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, how are they going to get out of this, right? And then God, pulls them out of it and makes something happen, because that's what God does, right? Like, what is that line from the Big Book? God is roomy, all-inclusive, broad and roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. And that has been my experience. Like, all I have to be is willing in order for God to work in my life. All my sponsees have to do is be willing, right? And they remind me that God is everything. When I'm in doubt and then something amazing will happen to them, I am reminded every single day that God is working in my life. My friendships, I have the most amazing friendships in this program. And my work life has gotten exponentially better. I was a real train wreck at work for a really long time. I've had to make amends, like my entire sales team at the round table. I've been really difficult to manage in the past, and I have great relationships with all of my former bosses today. And so I think I don't know. I think that's it. I'm just really, really glad to be able to tell my story. It's been a long time. Thanks for listening and being here.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.